Margaret Ceann Corla. I was in the office listening to the spat to and fro with the Minister and Deputy Owen O'Brien, whom I want to thank for putting this motion. Very, very important that we focus on this all the time. And I think that a lot of what the Minister said I'd like to respond to, particularly this idea that the opposition who represent local areas are constantly objecting to local plans. I mean, first of all, I think that and I know you understand it because you all came from being ministers, go back in your career, you had a focus on your local area. And first of all, every development that's proposed by every developer is not necessarily suitable to the local area. So we have along the canal in Drimna, where the Lewis creeps, a huge amount of built-to-rent development taking place, most of it by very lucrative development companies and very wealthy individuals. Conor McGregor, for example, is building several high-storey blocks of apartments along the canal, all built to rent. And indeed, the council do rent some of them back for council housing at market levels, not at a level that is reasonable or affordable for the public sector, but at market levels. And then we find that the people who are housed in those complexes by the local authorities are segregated. There is an apartheid process of segregating them, not allowing them have access to the creche or the playground area because they're not paying management fees. So what the government are creating in saying that when we object to these kind of plans, that we're objecting to the building of houses, quite the opposite. What we want to see is the building of social and affordable housing that is sustainable in the communities whom we serve and whom we know well. And that's just one example. There are lots of other examples, and I'm sure everybody in this House have more of them. But it's stuck in the middle of all of this is a cohort of people who are crucial to our economy. The teachers, the nurses, the public sector workers, the civil servants in this House, who earn too much to be on the social housing list, don't earn enough to live in apartments that are costing £2 grand, £2.5 grand, housing that is costing that in the cities like here, like Cork, like Limerick, where they're meant to be near their jobs. They are being pushed out and squeezed out. And honestly, Minister, very many of them are ending up in homelessness, because if they lose a tenancy because a landlord wants to sell up and puts them out of their home, they aren't on a low enough income to get on the housing list to receive supports from HAP or any other social income supports because their income is too high, and yet their income isn't high enough to be able to afford extortionate rents in the type of dwelling that I just described earlier on, which are littered all over the place, but which are not affordable to ordinary workers and workers we rely on to run society. So when we talk about crises in the public services, these crises all stem in terms of staff shortages, not getting enough SNAs in the schools, teachers in the schools, nurses in the hospitals, physiotherapists, speech therapists, admin workers in the civil service. That crisis all leads back to the housing crisis, because these workers who earn what would be considered traditionally a reasonably decent wage, they educate themselves to be able to earn that kind of money, they find they cannot live in the cities and in the areas from where they come and where they work. So this is a real joke on behalf of the government to say that they're dealing with it and that by 2025 and 2026, I'm talking about people in the here and now, like for example, one woman whom we know, who's 4 years in homeless accommodation with her son. She now shares a bed with her teenage son because he has grown up that much. In bed with your teenage son, and you're a public sector worker. In fact, she deals in the sector that looks after children's rights. What sort of a state is doing that to people? They won't give her income supports, she can't afford to pay the rents, and she's not entitled to go on the housing list. And I'm telling you, whether you believe it or not, there is a huge amount of people and families in that squeeze middle there, and they're not being represented. This morning in Morning Ireland, there was an item on about empty office blocks all over the country. Office blocks are empty, they can't rent them out, they're building more and more of them. So we've a shortage of construction workers. Why do you not call in the CIF and deal with the developers and tell them we need the workers in construction to build homes, not office blocks? And by the way, no more apart hotels and hotels littered all over our inner city. We don't need that. We need homes, and real social and affordable homes for people. And then we have the added problem of the actual social housing stock that we do have. Myself and the local councillor in Ballyfermot, Hazelden Ortoon, drove around Cherry Orchard about 2 weeks ago, having a look at the voids, and in 10 minutes we identified 24 voids in a small area that's notorious for its problems. Cherry Orchard is notorious for its problems because it has no services, it has no shop, it has no post office, it has no dentist, it has no shopping centre, and hasn't had for the last 35 years. And there's a chunk of land beside it, now owned by the LDA, public land, which the LDA intend developing, but they have no intention, if they get away with it, of negotiating, talking to, consulting with the local community and the local services. They have tried to entirely bypass them, and we're fighting them on that at the moment. But included in those 24 voids were 4-bed units, 3-bed units, which are like hen's teeth, and bungalows which are adaptable for disability. That is outrageous. In the entire ward there are 62 voids, and many of them lying empty for years. That is outrageous. And how are people supposed to get off the housing list that they're a long time on living in overcrowded conditions if the local authorities react in this way? People have been fighting for years for proper accommodation. I'll take, for example, Emmett Road, St Michael's Estate. For 21 years, the people there have been fighting to be listened to in terms of what is needed in the local community. Instead of that, they get a massive development of hundreds of apartments, studio apartments, one-bed apartments that are not sustainable. 24% social housing from an area that had 100% social down to 24%. Nobody is listening to the local communities, and that's why you get objections from people like us. I finally want to allow time for Deputy Barry to come in and to just move the addendum that we're putting to this motion. We don't want to change it, we thank Sinn Féin for putting it, but we do want to add on to it, and that is to reinstate the eviction ban. In Swords, in the Minister's own constituency, there is a landlord in Applewood, owned by Home Club Limited, who have evicted dozens of families in the last 9 months because they can, because the new element of extending all new tenancies to be long-term tenancies does not apply to them. They're on 6-year tenancies, and within now and the next 5 years there are tons of families, or dozens of families around this country, who could be evicted on that basis. So that needs to be dealt with. There's lots of shoring up to be done, but don't sit there and boast about your housing policy, because these are the real hard facts we're living with, and we need a reinstatement of the eviction ban ASAP.